And you don't do anything. What do? You sit and you vomit those words back to make people laugh. You know how hard I work for this?
Not only is Rotten Tomatoes lying to you about the Super Mario Bros. Movie, but it is also dead set on destroying the art of film criticism. So today, let's break down why Rotten Tomatoes is terrible at evaluating cinema. What created such a divide between critics and regular moviegoers, and why the haters are wrong about Mario. First of all, it's important to understand what Rotten Tomatoes actually is, because despite how many people reference the tomato meter when deciding what to see, a great deal of people fundamentally misunderstand the system. See, Rotten Tomatoes does not review films. Rather, it aggregates a large swath of reviews from various critics in order to establish a consensus regarding a film's quality. However, their method for this is incredibly misleading. For example, when you see that a film has a 90% on the site, it doesn't mean that the average critic score is a 9 out of 10. In reality, it means that 90% of critics gave the film a quote-unquote positive rating in their review, with positive simply meaning a score of 6 out of 10 or better. As you can probably imagine, this system has a lot of flaws and creates some serious issues in the world of film critique. First of all, lumping the so-called positive review scores together like that obliterates any possibility for nuance. If a critic giving a film a 10 out of 10 is weighted the same as a 6 out of 10, what good is that rating system? Those are two completely different critical responses, and reducing them down to, I guess they both liked it, is ridiculous. That would be like saying someone who makes 60 grand in a year is basically as wealthy as Elon Musk because they both are in the top 50% of earners. Secondly, this issue also makes the website heavily biased against polarizing films. Let's say a movie comes out that everyone universally agrees is fine. It gets 6s and 7s across the board, leading to a 100% on the tomato meter and a certified fresh rating. Audiences might think this film is a must-see, even though the critics individually would barely recommend it. Meanwhile, let's say another film is much more divisive, with critics that like it awarding it 9s and 10s, while those that don't score it as a 1 or a 2. This would theoretically result in a score of 50% on the tomato meter, labeling the film as rotten. Do you see how this system punishes bolder films and rewards more formulaic projects that are mildly entertaining but leave little to no impact on the viewer? Rotten Tomatoes claims that it's a trusted measurement of critical recommendation for millions of fans, and yet the system inherently misunderstands what makes someone recommend something. We don't recommend media that is simply passable to our friends and family. We recommend art that makes us feel significant emotion, even if that emotion might be negative. However, even if Rotten Tomatoes fixes the core issue of its rating system, there's still a problem of critic reviews fundamentally not aligning with that of regular audience members. If you look at the stark contrast between the Mario movie's 58% critic score and 96% audience rating, it's readily apparent that there's a significant divide between critic and consumer. But what exactly is causing this ever-growing rift? In general, I think film critics have a bad habit of looking for the iconography of good art rather than good art itself. It's sort of like how good food can be really expensive, but just because it's expensive doesn't mean that it's really good. With cinema, this manifests in what people often call Oscar bait, movies that make narrative, aesthetic, and thematic choices based on the types of things critics and the Academy seem to deem worthy of praise. If a movie contains enough of these elements, critics will often feel pressured to review it positively, else they might have their validity as a critic questioned. Conversely, reviewers often have an aversion or even disdain for films with mass appeal. Even when they score well on websites like Rotten Tomatoes, reviews often dismiss these crowd pleasers as being devoid of artistic value. Take Top Gun Maverick, for example. The screenplay is one of the most tightly structured and effective pieces of literature in the film industry. The cinematography is as beautiful as it is groundbreaking, and the film overall is hands down one of the best blockbusters in modern cinema. But despite all that, I still hear critics and fans alike preface their opinion of the film with statements like, well, the story is kind of simple, or it's not exactly a complex movie, but, like, my guy. Art isn't food. Just because you actually enjoyed it doesn't make it bad for you. And in the same breath, just because a film is depressing and features a popular actor dry heaving doesn't automatically mean it's elevated cinema. Critics like to use the same rubric to score each and every film, but each and every film is not trying to do the same thing. Which brings me to the Super Mario Bros. Movie. If you look on the website right now, you'll see Rotten Tomatoes has officially labeled Illumination's latest film rotten. Now compare this to the nearly perfect audience score, and you're forced to ask yourself, did these guys even watch the same movie? Well, yes and no. The audience watched the Super Mario Bros. Movie expecting to see the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Meanwhile, critics watched the Super Mario Bros. Movie expecting to see Citizen Kane. Jokes aside, Mario is not a perfect film. It is thinly plotted, devoid of any profound emotion, and would have been way better if Luigi was the main character. And yet, it's easily one of the most visually engaging animated films I've seen in the last decade. Every single frame is made with a reverence for Nintendo that would make Miyamoto himself seem like a fake fan by comparison. The set pieces are all incredibly entertaining. The musical score is pitch perfect, and to top it all off, it only asks for 90 minutes of your time, with at least 2 of those minutes being Jack Black singing. But I guess singing only gets you points if you're crying while doing it. I think the core issue is that critics didn't take into account what the Super Mario Bros. Movie was trying to accomplish. The source material was never driven by its narrative. The appeal of the Mario games is the vibrantly creative visuals, explorative adventure, and overwhelming whimsy. All these elements are beautifully captured by the film, but critics seem to incorrectly believe that narrative is the sole element the film should be judged by. But that's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Sure, a great story would have made the Mario film even better. Despicable Me is proof that Illumination is capable of balancing childish shenanigans with emotionally impactful storytelling.
Your mommy loves you with all her heart.
But just because the Super Mario Bros. Movie isn't as good as it could have been, doesn't mean that it isn't really dang great. If my comments about Top Gun Maverick piqued your interest, click here. Otherwise, click here to see what videos YouTube thinks you're gonna love. I'm Dylan, and this has been The Writer's Block.